Yeah, so thanks, Nomi, for organizing this. Hi, everyone. My name is Shania, and I'm the Special Advisor for Africa Innovation Mradi, where I manage the African Languages Fellows who are focused on Kiswahili, Luganda, and Kenya, Rwanda. And our work is really focused on building an open source data set that can have products built on top of it for underrepresented and underserved languages. So for this next couple of minutes, I'm joined by our team of fantastic fellows who will introduce themselves in this first round. And then we'll introduce themselves and also go on to just give us some highlights, basically a lightning talk about their work and its value, especially for the African continent and for the developer community. So I will kick it off with Remy.
Yeah, thanks, Shania, and hi everyone. And yeah, I'm very glad to be here. My name is Remy Moria, speaking from Kigali now, and I'm a community fellow working on voice technology and mainly on Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. And my work aims to address digital inclusion through the use of open and open technologies. Yeah, an example may be voice-enabled services like the COVID AI chatbots. Currently, a local startup is building in Rwanda to help like citizens of Rwanda getting real-time information about COVID, namely those who are illiterate. Yeah, thanks, Shana.
Thanks, Remy. Kat?
Hello, team. My name is Kathleen Siminyu. I'm based in Kilifi in Kenya. I'm part of the Mozilla Common Voice team, working on Kiswahili in particular, and I'm a machine learning fellow. So once we have the data set ready, my work is going to heavily focus on training the models downstream. I've prepared a bit of a write-up. So we're working on the Kiswahili dataset, which we expect to play the role of first and foremost, just ensuring greater inclusion of African languages in terms of speech recognition. But beyond that, I'd like to speak about other aspects of the data sets and the work that we're focusing on to ensure that we're preemptively mitigating demographic bias from the outset. So this is work to mitigate demographic bias, particularly along the axis of gender, age, accents, and dialects, so as to ensure comparatively accurate recognition performance for a wide array of speakers. I'm going to speak for 10 minutes. I hope that's fine, but that's the brief. Okay, cool. So speech recognition systems have been found to be biased or fall short in scenarios where the source data is not balanced. And balance implies having equal quantities of data available in different categories, which are represented in the data. So research has shown that speech recognition is more accurate for men than it is for women, and more accurate for individuals younger than 30 years of age than those older than 30 years of age. So to ensure we don't replicate the shortcomings that are identified in other data sets and systems, will require intentionality, and primarily at the point of data collection. So this will entail voice donation drives that are targeted at the groups likely to be underrepresented, and in this case, targeted at women and older populations. We consider collaboration with these groups to be an integral part of the process, given that their underrepresentation in data sets is characteristic of much deeper inequalities. Women, especially in developing countries, have less access to technology than men in terms of devices and the internet. Two other characteristics that may present downstream bias in applications are accent and dialects. So an accent is a distinctive way of pronouncing a language, especially one associated with a particular country, area, or social class, while a dialect is a particular form of a language which is peculiar to a specific region or social group. Kiswahili speakers are quite diverse, which makes developing a data set that is representative of them a challenging task. There are speakers for whom Kiswahili is their mother tongue and will be the ones largely affected by dialect variation. This demographic originates from along what is known as the Swahili coast of East Africa, consisting of a narrow coastal strip bordering the Indian Ocean and many associated islands of southern Somalia and northern Mozambique. Then there are those for whom Kiswahili is a second language, likely acquired by virtue of the fact that it is a national language in several countries. And for these speakers, their pronunciation may be affected by their mother tongue, giving rise to distinctive accents. To the native Swahili people, the variation of Kiswahili arising from the interaction with these speakers, for whom it is a second language, is known as that from upcountry, implying further inland away from the coast. Additionally, speakers who may have grown up in urban areas or spent a substantial amount of time abroad will likely develop accents with further foreign influences. And finally, there's the added complexity of language variations that arise due to factors such as code switching and borrowing or localization of languages from other languages. Localization of words from other languages. And this is common in contexts where the language communities are multilingual, for example, with English in Kenya and French in the DRC. And this gives rise to additional variations of the language. So to avoid a situation where an application developed works for one locale and performs considerably worse in another locale, only a couple of 100 kilometers away, we're working on creating subsets of the main data sets that are representative of the accents, the dialects, and potentially dominant language variations identified, in addition to subsets for older populations and for women. We expect these data sets to be useful in quantifying bias in downstream systems and in fine-tuning them to correct bias or to customize them for particular contexts. And I'm going to stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kat, for highlighting the issues around bias and the work that we're trying to do to make sure that Common Voice is actually quite inclusionary. So then I will pass it on to Brighton to introduce himself and to reflect as a community engagement fellow.
Very much, Shanai. My name is Brighton Mwasaru, based in Mombasa, Kenya, and a community fellow on the Swahili Common Voice team. What we've been doing is we have been working on building the asset that is doing the voice contribution validations within communities. So since we launched the Kiswahili language, we've been doing a number of community sessions with Rebecca. So Rebecca has joined. So what we've been doing is we have done a number of community sessions. We are building the data sets. We are open to communities where we can be able to work with to help build the Kiswahili voice data sets. We are looking for a number of sentences right now to help build a test corpus on the Kiswahili Common Voice platform. And we welcome anyone who has or knows anyone with sentences in Swahili that are in the public domain to help us with the work, because then the more sentences you have, the better the data that is produced, the data that then Kathleen will be able to use to teach, to build the models. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brighton. I know Rebecca has connectivity challenges. I want to check if she can participate. Else, we can then, I can probably potentially pose a couple of questions to you all as fellows, just to really to understand some more about like the value for you personally in this work. Rebecca, were you able to speak? I think you can text me via chat. Great. So, Rebecca is one of our other community fellows who's based in DRC, but also connected to Tanzania, where she's, just like Brighton, is working towards community engagement with a focus on ensuring that our work is actually gender inclusive. So she's led some of our work around gender planning, our gender engagement plan, and also just really making sure that as we develop this project, it is going to be inclusionary from conception to actual implementation as we launch the use cases. So one of the things that I also want to highlight as part of the project before I hand it back to the fellows is we are going to have, specifically for Kiswahili, we are going to have use case grants or product grants in 2022. Once the data is ready, people would be able, those who are interested in building products in our area of focus in agriculture and finance, will be able to put together a grant proposal to then have the kind of funding to build products of the models that we would have developed or the data that we have. And that for us is going to be particularly important because we want to see it being done by the developer community that's based on the African continent, that understands the context, in particular issues around that Kat has mentioned around bias and exclusion, but also reflecting on low connectivity and low digital literacy issues that we have on the continent. So I'm going to pass it back to the fellows, and I guess we can go in the order that we had the first time. What has been, for you who's working on this kind of project that Mozilla is funding, what has been the most significant value for you in terms of like seeing your language being focused on and being represented in the voice language system? So I'll start with you, Remy.
Yeah, thanks, Shanae. Yeah, I think this has been very important. And so looking back, like from a previous experience, I was working at a startup where we were building a USSD platform for people to contribute like in savings group, more of SACCOs in Kenya. And there was this time like I went on the field and saw this old grandma. She couldn't read on contributing to the USSD, even if it's actually a lower technology. And she will always give her phone and her M-Pesa, like mobile money pin, to the admin to contribute. And then from there, that was back in 2017. I was like, I think it would be good, like if you can power maybe our technology with voice. And then we look back at the team, and so there were no data sets maybe to train a model, especially in kindergarten. And having this project funded by Mozilla was very good, and it was very exciting to work on it.
Thank you so much, Remy. So it was the value of actually seeing someone within your community being able to make use of the technology in a way that best served them and allowed for them to be able to use their device more comfortably. And I will pass the same question on to Kat.
Thank you, Chennai. So I'll say two things. First is access to resources. And I say this because I've for a long time been part of research communities that are working to build resources for African languages. And this has been done on largely a volunteer basis, which can often mean that the effort is not focused. We're trying to leverage people's interests and people's energy. So it can mean that today I want to work on this and a collaborator of mine wants to work on something different. So access to resources means focused efforts. It also means greater accountability because, you know, now people have given money, there's things that they expect. So we have to deliver whether our interests wane or waver, that kind of thing. So I think it's very valuable to have access to resources. That means accountability mechanisms. And the second thing is just being able to widen the conversation, because in the past, it has been a very one-sided conversation led and dominated by techies. But working on Common Voice has given me the opportunity to start creating spaces for us to collaborate with others. And I'll highlight particularly the engagements that we're doing with linguists. So we're finally acknowledging that, hey, yes, we have all the technical skill, but then there are people who have built livelihoods and their life's work focusing on these languages, and they may not have the technical capability that we have, but then they do have the language knowledge that we definitely need. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kat. It's being resourced and widening who else is participating. That's also quite important, in addition to seeing this being reflective in our own communities. And I also pass it on to Brighton.
So For me, coming from a background where we from innovation ecosystem in the hub space and doing a lot of digital literacy programs, realized that we used to do a lot of programs for the young ones, but then when they go home, we have parents who are not able to be included in the different use of technology. So the Common Voice Swahili platform project particularly is important because for me, it means that then we are able to include them because Kiswahili is the language they use every single day. So it means then they also become included in the different innovations and the technologies that some of the kids are learning in schools. And the other thing is for the startups within the ecosystem, especially for Kenya, East Africa, where Kiswahili is spoken, that asset creates a lot of value for them because then it lowers the barrier for them to get into the voice innovation ecosystem. Then that means we have more products and that are produced for or built by our people and used by our communities.
Thanks so much, Brighton. The ability to then have this project where, again, centering community to actually then be able to use the tool is so valuable when we think about a common voice work. So I know, Nika, you have a question. Is it okay if I pass the mic on to you and you can ask the team?
Sure, and thanks to all of you. It's been really interesting hearing about the work you're each doing respectively in this area. So my question, I think it could be for anyone, but it was prompted based on something Kat said, and I was thinking about the I don't know, the issue or the beauty of dialects and different accents. And you know, I imagine that Kiswahili is not the only African language that would be experiencing this. I know, you know, for certain there's Igbo, for example, in Nigeria. And so as we hope to perhaps expand on, you know, the number of languages that the project like Common Voice can reach, I was wondering, given the challenges that various dialects and accents can present, you know, have you all thought about perhaps like what a repeatable process could look like in order to, you know, you all are seeming to be figuring it out from like a Kiswahili perspective, for example. What are some of the things that other groups, when they start focusing on other languages, perhaps some repeatable steps that you all have learned that others can take and utilize for other languages?
Thank you for the question. So I think Common Voice in and of itself is a powerful tool and platform. It makes efforts quite easy in terms of translation, which is done through a platform known as Pontoon. So that makes translation pretty easy because it splits sentences at, it splits text at sentence level and gives you little suggestions because it has a translation memory. So if a term has been seen before, it makes it easier to translate it subsequently. And I think, again, Common Voice in and of itself is a powerful tool that other communities can already start plugging into to build those resources. I do see some challenges in onboarding new communities to Common Voice, and I know this is stuff that the wider team is aware of. So first, just in terms of the criteria or the requirements for a language to go live on Common Voice, there's a minimum requirement of having the platform localized, the UI itself localized to whatever language you want to use. And then there's also a minimum requirement of 5,000 sentences, which may be a lot to ask of different groups which have various dynamics. It may be a volunteer group that is composed of 2 people versus, you know, the 3 fellows funded by Mozilla. So dynamics will vary. And then another challenge that I think perhaps Common Voice can address, but is not currently tailored to, is just the fact that there are very many languages that are spoken and not written. So right now we're collecting data and we're being very reliant on text, but there are languages which are widely spoken, but then the orthographies have not been formalized. Nobody ever sat down, no language board was set up to say, this is the correct way to spell this word out. But then among the homogeneous groups of those communities, people are able to communicate just fine. So I think further expansion could be starting to think about data collection that is much more reliant on just speech. Yeah, I'm going to stop there and invite the rest of the team to contribute.
Remy, do you have any reflections specifically around like Kenya, Rwanda, and accents? Is this was something that also emerged and some lessons can be learned?
Yeah, I think for Kenya, Rwanda, so we don't have like a lot of accent and intonation for other languages. So I think it's more of a bit like straightforward. Yeah, and because when you look at maybe Yoruba and Igbo, so like intonation can actually vary on similar words. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nika, and thank you, Kat and Remy, for your interventions. So, Kat, you have a question? Oh,
yeah, I've got a question for Remy. Does Kinyarwanda have dialects?
Dialects as other kind of like spoken in different region of Rwanda. Hello.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
I mean, like dialect in so Kinyarwanda basically it's spoken like slightly differently in different part of regions of Rwanda. So,
okay.
Yeah, but like it's always actually the same. The word is the same. It's more of like the way maybe people pronounce like some words. It's always actually
okay.
the same. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, cool. Thank you, everyone. So I'm actually going to start wrapping up the session because as promised, we said that we would take 30 minutes and we are now 5 minutes in. So what I would like to do is just ask for closing remarks from the fellows in turn, just reflecting on the project and what are your hopes for the future of work programs such as Common Voice in terms of making available open source data sets of African languages like this. So we can start with, I guess we can go in reverse order and start with you, Kat, then Brighton and Remy.
I'll say that we're working a lot on the documentation of our efforts. There's things which we're trying and failing at, and it's a bit scary, but I realize that it's not been done it's being done for the first time. So I'll say we're doing a lot of documentation efforts, and we'll be working to communicate that publicly so that other communities can learn from us. But then if there are language communities or individuals who can speak languages that are underrepresented on the internet, I'd say that starting to work towards greater representation is as easy as, writing a sentence a day, starting to journal. We decided to start a blog in Kiswahili, and it's already easy to see how that's going towards text on the Common Voice data on the Common Voice platform, and then subsequently people are going to be reading these texts. So there's very little things which you as an individual can do, and then this effort is multiplied if you come together with like-minded people. So start where you are and let's meet ahead. Thank you.
Super excited about the efforts to allow for low or no connectivity, low bandwidth for the Common Voice platform. That's very exciting to see because then internet is still a challenge for most of our communities. So I'm super excited to see that happen. If it wasn't mentioned already, there's a call for proposals for building the Common Voice platform to enable low or no bandwidth contribution of voices and validation of sentences. And that's something I'm very excited because then it allows us to be able to reach more people. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, just to add on what Brighton says, like a lot of, especially in Rwanda, we've seen a lot of people like using WhatsApp, sharing like voice audio, and for low boundaries like connectivity, that will be maybe something very good since we can have WhatsApp on 2G, And but one of the things we're doing specifically in Uganda, it's more of like creating more partnership with linguists, especially the Bugandan Kingdom, who owns like the Luganda language. So they do a lot of work around Uganda. And yeah, this is the thing we've been doing, because sourcing sentences haven't actually been easy for the Lugandan project. Thanks.
Thank you all so much. I think those are such insightful comments and really thinking about where one can start. And I hope when people are watching this video, they'll be able to have some of the questions that they have answered when it comes to Common Voice. And also, please do get in touch with us. You can find us on our Common Voice team and just generally ask us questions in terms of how can you participate, how can you contribute, and what are the other things that you need to know so that we can build this as a community-driven project to enable people to have open source data sets. Thank you all so much. I will hand it on to Naomi and Nika.
Thank you so much, team. It was great to hear from you and see your faces. Thank you for the presentation. And so Nneka and I will now transition into presenting on lean data practices. I understand, Chennai, that you all might need to jump off. So if that's the case, maybe I'll just say thank you and have a good rest of your day.
All right, so I'll go ahead and get started then, Noemi. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Nneka Ekechukwu-Soyinka. I am a senior privacy manager at Mozilla, where I spend a lot of my day focusing on the operational side of privacy, working with teams to help them build privacy into whatever it is that they want to do internally or externally, as well as when we are engaging with vendors, ensuring that we're holding them to the same standards. The other part of my job is around privacy education, which is my favorite part of my job. And that's not only educating our employees, but also educating others outside of Mozilla about privacy and how it doesn't have to be a big scary thing. And one of the ways that we do that is through evangelizing lean data practices, which is one of the things we'll be talking to you today. Noemi, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you, Nneka. So hello, good morning on this side of the world, evening, afternoon, wherever you might find yourselves when you're watching this recording. My name is Noemi Hailu. I am the Africa Mradi Program Manager for Mozilla. And I'll actually kick it off with just giving a brief overview of the Mradi before we start jumping into the lean data practices. So the Mozilla's Africa Innovation Mradi, and Mradi means program in Kiswahili, is a program that seeks to foster an ecosystem of allies that are working towards a healthier internet and to promote innovation that's grounded in the unique needs of users in the Africa region. Some of the important tenets of our program is to build with and not for. So we really emphasize working with local partners and meeting user needs that are tailored to local contexts and solving local problems within the 4 focus areas that you see here on the screen. So we work on policy around legislative and regulatory frameworks that address internet health issues playing out in the region. One of our main pillars is around innovation and looking at alternative and African models of innovation that serve African users. And then, of course, there's an important pillar around products and localizing Mozilla products to serve the real needs of people in the Africa region. And then finally, one of the pillars is around movement building and building a strong, sustainable ecosystem of allies. So under this innovation pillar, we are critically analyzing what local innovation means. And as I mentioned, a key approach to implementing the Africa Mradi is working with our partners, and Afrilabs is one of our key partners under that innovation pillar. Last year, Mozilla and Afrilabs hosted a series of roundtable discussions to explore challenges, opportunities around the African innovation ecosystem. And based on these discussions, you can see the image in the right-hand corner there. Afrilabs produced a Pan-African study on some of the key challenges faced by technology entrepreneurs in the region, and those ranged from access to capital, legal and policy barriers, cross-border collaboration, and competition as it relates to closed platforms. So today we are thrilled to present an important initiative of the Africa Mradi. We've been working on this in partnership with Afrilabs to create a course on Mozilla's lean data practices, which is specifically tailored to the startup and entrepreneur communities across Africa. And so Afrilabs is really well poised to cater to that community. Next slide, please. And one of our key advisors on this project, Professor Bitangi Ndemo, was not able to join us in person, but he wanted to share a special message with you all.
It is my distinct pleasure to take part in Afrilabs' 10th annual gathering. I am here today because of the relationships that we have with Mozilla and Afrilabs. And I am happy that I'm speaking to you because we are talking about data which is increasingly becoming important in Africa. We are going through digitalization of the economies in Africa. And virtually every economy has actually begun to digitalize. So it is important for us to begin to discuss how we treat data. And that is why I am speaking to you today. You want to avoid risk, such as legal action, getting sued, getting fined, even prison time for mismanaging data. So Mozilla has come up with a method of managing data, and we call it Lean Data Practices Framework. This would help you build trust with your clients through transparency. Clearly communicate your privacy policies and practices. Think through the type of data you collect and why you collect that.
Oh, sorry about that. Let's see if it will.
It is my with your clients through transparency. Clearly communicate your privacy policies and practices. Think through the type of data you collect and why you collect that data. So the data you collect should be related and even necessary to your business model. With the emergence of new technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence, as well as continued move into digital economy, more data will be required for decision making. Because of this, governments around the world are looking into the data protection laws. And I know several countries in Africa have already developed these data protection laws. And so trust, privacy, and security are paramount moving forward. Mozilla's Lean Data Practice Framework would help your company minimize risk and fortify your brand by building in trust. This presentation would give you an overview and preview a sample of the tailored course that Mozilla has developed in partnership with Afrilabs, so that people begin to understand this important topic. I highly recommend you to sign up for the course once it is available soon. Thank you, and I wish you the best in this time that you are meeting on the 10th annual gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. So let's walk through a brief interactive scenario. After downloading a popular app on your smartphone, you are signing up for an account. Let's ask through some questions so that you can thoroughly use the app and all it has to offer. So 3 questions for you to consider. The first one, so after you get the app, the sign up form is asking for a lot of information, but some fields are marked as optional. Do you complete all of the information fields or only what is required? So take a look at these options. And what would you do? Do you only fill out the ones that are required? Do you fill up all of the information fields, or does it depend? So Neko, maybe I can point to you and see what you would usually typically do in this scenario.
Yeah, so for me, I tend to only do what is required. Of course, there are situations where it might depend, perhaps how much information are they asking of me from the beginning. But when it's a lot of information, especially when we start talking about payment card information and additional things, if they don't need me to provide some of that data, then I'm only going to provide the basics, which might usually be my name, my email address, perhaps my phone number since it's an app. And so I'm going to try to keep it pretty minimal, which will also help me get into the app faster, because that's why I'm ultimately downloading it.
Great, thank you. Let's take a look at another question. So, realizing that you're providing your personal data for this app that you've just downloaded, do you expect to know before signing up whether your data is being shared with third parties or being used for other purposes by the company? So in this scenario, would you say yes, definitely, or it depends, or no, I just want to be done with the sign-up process? What would you do in this scenario?
As a privacy professional, I would love to say yes, definitely. And I would think maybe, hopefully, I'm perhaps doing more due diligence than the average person. But I would expect generally, if something is happening to my data that I wouldn't expect it, to be happening to, I would definitely expect to know before signing up. But whether or not I trust companies to actually let me know is a different story. But I guess I'd say I would definitely expect to know, but I would also want to know upfront and not have to be digging and doing further research just to find out if it's happening.
Yes, I hear you. So let's look at one last question in this scenario. So you see that there's a link to the app's privacy policy, which you can read before submitting the form. How often do you read these type of privacy policies? Always? Maybe sometimes skimming through it? Do you rarely read them, or would you say that you never really take a look at the privacy policies before sharing some data? Nneka, once again, I'm curious what your thoughts might be on this one.
So for me, I would say the majority of times I will click the link to at least look at the privacy policy, but many times it's so daunting, and they want you to read through 5 or 10 pages of legal text, which can dissuade me from wanting to thoroughly read it. So I would say I sometimes read it in its entirety. I wish it was all the time, but sometimes companies don't make it very easily digestible.
And I can certainly relate to that. I think more or less that's the same approach I typically take. Although since joining Mozilla and working on these, I've been a little bit more discerning to at least scroll through the privacy policies.
And Bertone says he starts them and then never finishes.
So we went through these 3 questions. If you could go to the next slide, please. Just to show that our behaviors match what our consumers and customers are also experiencing. So if we're not reading the privacy policies when we're engaging with technology and applications, can we expect that our customers and consumers are going to also read it and find the important information there? So I'll pass it over to you, Nneka, so you can walk through and explain the LDP framework.
Thanks, Noemi. So lean data practices is definitely a framework that can help all of us with being more transparent with our users, with our consumers of our technologies, so that they're able to understand our data handling practices, know who we're sharing the data with, know if there are additional uses of data, and some of those things that we just walked through the poll. So as you would have heard in Professor Ndemo's talk at the beginning of this presentation, what lean data practices is a framework, and it's very flexible. So this first course that we'll talk more about in a little bit focuses on the startup and entrepreneur community, but it's very flexible and applicable to many different types of industries. And we use it to help advance privacy, security, and this concept of being open and transparent with our consumers. People are entrusting their data to us as Mozilla, or to you from your various companies. And so when they're giving their data to us, they're expecting us to protect their data and handle it with care. And so this framework helps us to do just that. You might be familiar with like generally accepted privacy principles or other privacy frameworks. Lean data practices, while it has, of course, similarities with those, unlike the others, it's built around 3 pillars, which you see here. So the first pillar is to engage your users. So this is about keeping your customers informed and ultimately empowered so that they understand what's happening with their data and they can make the choices that are best for them. The second one is to stay lean. So traditionally, when people hear about staying lean, they think about data minimization and minimizing the amount of data that you're collecting. Now, this, of course, is true, but as Professor was saying, data is becoming more and more important. And so what we like to say with regards to staying lean is that it's less about not collecting any data and more about ensuring that you have meaningful data collection. And so the data that you are collecting, ensuring that it's ultimately bringing value to you. And then lastly, we have build security. And that's simply about, for that data that's entrusted to us, making sure that we're protecting it. And so there are many benefits to lean data practices, both from an increase in trust perspective, as well as a reduction in risk perspective. From a trust perspective, of course, your consumers, your customers, this type of transparency will help increase their trust in you and your brand. But it also helps, from an investor's perspective, other business partners that you might be working with in order to power your technology or be successful. Using the lean data practices framework and applying it helps to build trust with a variety of stakeholders that you might have, and of course, ultimately help your brand. And then from a risk reduction perspective, when you're protecting the data and ensuring you're only collecting what's useful for you in the first place, you're hopefully reducing consumer harm because you're minimizing the likelihood of risks, as well as addressing how you would handle, like let's say a data breach happens, how you handle data breaches is also addressed in the lean data practices framework. But it also reduces the financial risk should there be fines, for example, or brand impacts because of the data handling or issues because you weren't following lean data practices. Okay, so maybe by now you're thinking, this sounds kind of interesting, but why is a company like Mozilla talking to me about this? Well, we do have some experience in the space of product development and applying lean data practices as those products are getting developed. So as you may or may not know, of course, we have the Firefox browser, but we have so many other different types of products that we've introduced to the market throughout the years. And lean data practices is something that we work to incorporate with each new product introduced. We just heard from the Common Voice team, and lean data practices was something that we worked on with the greater team when that was first being rolled out, for example. So a variety of different solutions from a technology perspective, and we keep lean data practices in mind with all of them. So this isn't the first time that lean data practices has been a thing for Mozilla. This is something that we've had for some years now, and something that we've been evangelizing and teaching for many years. And so traditionally, how we were doing it was through live and remote trainings, as well as roundtable discussions, mostly in-person sessions pre-pandemic. And then of course, we have transitioned to more virtual sessions where we're still able to talk through the framework and how to apply it on a more granular level and the different tips for each of those pillars. We've also reached a variety of industries. So, of course, we're in the tech space, but we've talked through lean data practice concepts and worked with people representing a variety of industries, including the health space, the creative art space, e-commerce, and others. And of course, we are working to be more and more global with this work, but it hasn't always just existed in a vacuum. We've already reached over 100 organizations across Kenya, India, the US, and then some countries in Europe. And then of course, with this project now, we're definitely hoping to expand beyond just Kenya on the African continent to reach many, many, many others in the region. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Noemi.
Thank you, Nneka. So as we mentioned, we have been working with Afrilabs and developing the lean data practices framework into a course tailored to entrepreneurs and startups on the continent. And so we're really excited now to share a little bit of a teaser. This is the first time that we're sharing it publicly. And just note that some of these scenes are still in draft form, and the full course content will be available down the line with all of these pieces together. But some of what the course is going to provide is an understanding of key terms and concepts as it relates to the framework.
Lean Data Practices, or LDP, is a flexible framework that anyone can use to advance privacy, security, and innovation in their organization. It is useful for anyone with access to personal data, whether that data is for consumers of your technology or your employees. Lean Data Practices, or LDP.
And so another aspect that the course is going to cover is that you'll be able to learn through real life examples and using companies that are Africa-based to really be able to have this be applicable in a practical way.
Grow Intelligence is using artificial intelligence to tackle two of the biggest problems facing the world today: food security and climate change.
Great. And Not only will we be using real examples from companies working across the continent, but we'll also be providing practical applications for your own company in your own work. So we'll have some supplementary materials that will be included in the course, such as worksheets and checklists that you can use.
What data matters to your company? Use the LDP data categories worksheet found in your What data matters to your company? Use the LDP data categories worksheet found in your supplementary materials as a guide to identify the data and sensitivity levels for your own company.
So now we've given you a little preview, a snippet of the upcoming course. I'll pass it over to you, Nneka, so you can tell them about some next steps.
Thanks, Noemi, and thank you for putting up with my technical difficulties during those videos. And so it's been really exciting for us to prepare to share with you all what we have coming up for this Lean Data Practices course and the Afrilabs community, and of course, many others. And so because we are partnering with Afrilabs for this, and we're focusing on the startup and entrepreneur community, in partnership with Afrilabs, there were a couple of things we wanted to offer, especially for you all. So the first is the opportunity to sign up to get free access to the course once we launch it. There's a link here, https://mzl.la/ldp-signup. And so by putting your name down here, you will be added to the list so that once we launch the course later this year, you get a notification and you know to go in and register so that you have free access to the course. Secondly, we are also inviting you to be on the lookout for future opportunities with Afrilabs as it relates to this Lean Data Practices work. So you will have the opportunity to participate in a future cohort with Afrilabs where you'll have the opportunity to dive deeper into those Lean Data Practices concepts and how to apply it to your organizations, and as well as diving deeper into how different companies are using it. So the course, of course, has not only the intro to LDP, but also further explains in a very easy to understand way with different tips and tricks how to stay lean, how to engage your audiences, and how to build insecurity. But then with this Afrilabs cohort, it's an opportunity for you to dive deeper and further your learning with others as well, since the course, of course, is self-service. So you likely may have questions at this time, even if not during this presentation. So if you have questions even about our Africa Innovation Mradi program more broadly, feel free to reach out to Noemi, and her email address is here. If you want to talk more about Lean Data Practices specifically, perhaps you have some questions on the course before you sign up, you can feel free to reach out to either one of us. And of course, since this is something that we've already been doing for a while, feel free to go to leandatapractices.com and see some of the content that we already have available to you, including some existing downloadable worksheets and things, should you want to check out some of Lean Data Practices stuff before the full course is out. So with that, though, we thank you greatly for your time, and we hope to be hearing from many of you as you sign up to take our course and hopefully participate in a future Afrilabs cohort.
Great. Thank you so much.